everyone. Welcome to another episode of a Headed Home podcast. We're your hosts, Jen and Andrew.
What is up?
We've been on a roll lately with interviewing some top real estate agents in Colorado, and today is no different.
Yes, learning a ton.
Yes.
Learning a ton.
So we have Katrina Nguyen with us today, and she's been in the business since 2013. And has a background in marketing, which I'm going to ask you about here shortly. She has been a 5-star professional award winner the last 4 years and is highly regarded in the real estate community. She loves challenges and looks to learn something new every day. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yay, we're excited you're here. I was just telling Andrew before this, our house is like decked out in Halloween garb everywhere. I had to move when I was prepping this morning. I had like a skeleton back here, and I thought it might be a little too much for the video today, but we're ready for Halloween. Have you bought a Halloween costume yet?
I'm supposed to dress up as one of the Jim Carrey characters for a Halloween costume party I'm going to this Saturday, and I'm struggling because I'm like, okay, do I do my dog and I, we like do matching Halloween costumes. So I'm trying to figure out like what to do with him. He might be Batman, and I'll probably be the Riddler. So
that's what I was gonna say. Yes.
Or we could do Ace Ventura. I haven't decided yet, but I guess my costume is kind of decided at this point. I was trying to do something like, I've never been like a sexy costume wearer. I've tried, and people are just like, oh, you went for this. I'm like, is it not like kind of hot? Like, come on. But no, every year people are disappointed in me.
I always have this problem of like being like odd, like weird, like buying weird costumes to be funny. So like I've been just like weird stuff, like I'm like the costume buyer that just buys like that weird shit that no one buys in the Halloween store. So, but
weren't you a rock one year?
I was a rock one year.
I
I was Daisy Duck one year with like the legit like costume that had like her duck butt, like, and it was so big. It was just like hilarious.
I was Bob Ross, and everybody thought I was Drake, which was
no.
Because I'm holding the paintbrush, and they're like, "Oh my God, are you Drake?" I was like, wow, these millennials are killing me. No,
wow.
Bob Ross. And I guess like the wig was such a hit that people kept stealing it. And so I don't know where it was or where it went, but I spent like $10 on this thing, and I wanted to save it because I wanted to be Bruno Mars the following year. And I think someone stole it and brought it to San Francisco at this point. So we don't know where Bob is, but I'm sure he's having a great life somewhere.
It's devastating.
Yeah,
I love that costume idea. I like the Jim Carrey theme though. That's a good idea. There's a lot of options there. You got the mask, you could just get a green mask and go that way. I bet they make actually like specific masks for that.
You need to get a costume.
I want to do one. I'm gonna do a Jim Carrey one. Maybe we'll see.
You need to get a costume. So I'm being the fairy godmother, and because my kids conned me into having a Halloween party this year, and so I figure fairy godmother is like a good one, safe bet.
Yes, I think it's great. Something like controversial,
right?
Like that's like.
Yeah, probably like one year I was a pregnant nun.
Oh, yes. Remember? I was a priest and you were a pregnant nun. Yeah, we took that to the work party. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if I was like a zombie, right? Like what was it called? Little Red Riding Hood one year. And I guess like, I don't know. I feel like I was in like really random things, but it's always like super last minute, and I just throw it together and hope that people know what I am. So, I don't know.
Awesome. Well, I would love, when I was reading your background, I was really interested in hearing about how you had a background in marketing, and I would just love to know, like, how did you get into real estate? Where did you kind of like start this adventure? Just tell me that story. I would love to know.
Ooh, okay. So I So when I first got into like marketing, I was like in high school. And so my teacher was like, oh my God, you could really sell things. And I'm just like, okay, I don't really know if that's like a talent, but okay. So I started studying marketing. And then in college, I studied, I tacked on like public relations and entrepreneurship. And then once I graduated, uh, no one was really hiring a entrepreneur, and I didn't really know actually, like, I mean, you don't have any money to start a business. And then I wasn't really into like public relations yet, because there wasn't, we don't have like a lot of I guess like Mark, it was like in the middle of like social media starting, Facebook starting to become a thing and stuff like that. So I started to get into marketing, and I just realized that like that's just not what I want to do. And
Yeah.
so finally, like I kind of hit a quarter life crisis. I mean, that's what I would call it. I definitely hit a quarter life crisis, and I was just thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like I studied all of these things, and I'm not interested in just one particular thing, but I need to do something different because I'm so miserable, and I can't. This can't be the only option. And so for the longest time, my mom wanted a real estate agent in the family. But since I was like the disobedient one, like I just figured the middle child would be it. So I was like, you go be the real estate agent mom's always wanted. And I think once I had my quarter life crisis, my mom just told me like, hey, why don't you just try it and see what happens? And I said no. And then 6 months later, I'm like, okay, fine. I'll try it out and see what happens. And then I just fell in love. Honestly, I just was so fascinated by real estate, and I wish I would have done more research on what the lifestyle would have been because that was a shock to me. But I really fell in love with it. And I think that the fact that I get to work with people and do something meaningful every day is exactly why I'm in it, and I'm still in it almost like what 9 years later. So yeah.
That's awesome. Did you have any did you have any friends in your friend group or anyone around you that had, a similar career that you were able to like connect with? Or was it like, were you kind of just like thrown in and figuring it out as you went?
I was kind of like thrown in and just figuring it out, which I think was a blessing in a way, because I was so naive to the process that I was very open to just learning wherever I can. And I think it was just, I mean, it wasn't like I don't know. I mean, I just felt like, in real estate, people are so good at putting this facade on that they have everything together. But then once you're in it, you're like, oh my God, everyone's such a hot mess. We're always trying to figure things out. And even if you're in it for a long time, you're constantly learning and you're growing. And I think that that was something that in my first couple of years of being a real estate agent, I didn't meet those type of people yet. I met them later. I just met a bunch of people that just, thought they had it together and like knew what they were just a little bit more arrogant. And it made me feel like maybe this isn't for me. And so I had to unlearn that and then relearn my process.
I think that's interesting that you say that, because I know you went through like a similar experience, just like when you got into the mortgage industry. It was like very, like you wear suits and you're very formal, and like you have this image that you're, doing, and like that's not you at all. Like I mean, he's wearing a backwards hat for God's sakes, and maybe a shirt that you haven't washed.
Well, 10 years ago, I've washed this shirt, by the way. I mean, things have changed. Things have changed over the years. But yeah, when I got in the mortgage business, it was the same way. Like you couldn't have facial hair. Everyone was expected to wear a suit. I think the average age of loan officer back then was like mid 50s. I think the average age of a real estate agent is, we looked that up a couple of weeks ago. I want to say it's around 50. I don't know. I know it's still a little bit older, but it is tough when you get into an industry like that and there's a specific image that maybe you don't fit into exactly. You kind of have to get over those mental hurdles right off the bat to be like, okay, am I built for this? Can I make it here? How did you, and especially at the beginning of any sales career, it's hard to get some momentum going. So like, what was like an early win for you, or something that happened where it made you feel like you belonged?
Oof, that didn't start until probably like 4 years in. Unfortunately, I think the first, I would say the first 4 years. I think because I think after 4 years, I was like, yes, I finally made it. But the first 4 years was such a struggle, just figuring out. It wasn't even just figuring out who I wanted to be as a real estate agent. It's also me just figuring out who I wanted to be
Mm.
and stop
Mhm.
modeling that after someone else's definition
Mhm.
of success. I needed to do a lot of soul searching. And so I hired a life coach and we really dived into what really fuels me as a person. And it wasn't money. It wasn't the sales volume, which was crazy because everybody focuses on that when you first start. It's like, you got to hit these numbers, you got to get these calls, you got to do these, face to
Yeah.
faces and all of those things. And those are all great. But that wasn't what got me up every morning. And I
Mhm.
think that when I was able to dive in a little bit deeper, I love to advocate for people. Like, I'm your girl. Like, if you need something, I'm like there. I'm there to help you reach your goals. And I love the therapy and the consultation side of things. Like, it's so
Mhm.
fascinating to me. And um and when I was able to focus more on how I can add value to their life, whether it's through real estate or as a friend or as a neighbor or something, that's what really changed things for me. And I think I also gave myself permission to set my own terms and do what I want to do, not because somebody else told me to do. And I think that was something that was such a huge breakthrough for me because, I'm Vietnamese, and as the firstborn in any Vietnamese or Asian family, there's a lot of pressure to be perfect and to be a certain type of way, and I had to let go of all of that and to do things on my own terms. And if I can't do it on my own terms, then I'm not interested. That was the term. That was it.
No, I think that's great, and I think what you said that's really important that I think a lot of people miss, and this can be in any career, but you have to, like, really truly understand your why and, like, what drives you because it isn't well, maybe for some people, but I think there's something behind, like, the money or the success or, like, do you want to be recognized as someone who's successful? Or do you do it, because you need to help your family out? Or, like, whatever that why is for you, I think is really important to define because if you don't have, like, a good understanding of that, I mean, like you said, you can't get through 4 really difficult years, easily if you don't understand your why. Like, you really having the why to focus on, I think is really, really important, especially if you're an entrepreneur and, like, all of that is resting on you, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really neat that you did that.
Thanks.
Yeah. And having the awareness too to kind of step back and realize that you had to do some soul searching and some coaching, which I think is great. But having the awareness of like, okay, yeah, why am I doing this? And if I'm not being fulfilled by just the transactions, then something else is wrong. And that's really cool that you went and defined like what is important to you, because then you can take that to the marketplace and then
Mhm.
have fun while also being successful, which is the way to do it.
Yeah. And I think that when you're able to do that, like, if you're able to be vulnerable with yourself, then you could be vulnerable with your clients. And I think that when I love, especially nowadays, when people interview other real estate agents and then they meet with me and they're like, oh, you're on a whole different level. And I'm just like, thank you so much for saying that because it was such a process to get to this point, and I'm so proud of my accomplishment. Like, my accomplishment isn't how many homes I sell, it's the fact that I'm able to reach this level of like inner peace and happiness and be able to spread that onto other people, like that is the greatest gift that you can ever have.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
I think the other part that, like, I noticed about you, and I think people, um, notice this very quickly is, like, when someone meets someone, right? Like, you are trying to, like, figure them out, and I think that when you know yourself really well and you're really, like, who you are with the people that you meet, people know that you're authentic, and then that immediately builds trust. And I think what happens sometimes is people who don't know themselves as well or are trying to play this part that's like not actually them, like people know like that they're kind of full of shit, you know? And so I think I mean that's probably why people feel like it's easy to connect with you.
Yeah, I think so because I love it. I think it's so true when there's people I meet on social media or whatever, and I follow them, and then I meet them in person, and you're just like,
Huh?
you're like not who I expected you to be. It's so crazy to me, and it's a little disappointing sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But when people like, I feel like I get the opposite where they're like, I wish that you would post more. I wish that you would do more videos and stuff, and I'm just like, ooh, I get stage fright, so I don't do them as often, but I'm trying to get over that because I feel like I think that's just something that I'm still working on, even like 9 years in, that I still struggle with imposter syndrome, and I don't feel like I'm always like good enough to be in a room full of people, so I feel like I'm constantly learning, but
Mhm.
sometimes I have to look back and be like, okay, we made it pretty far. We did pretty well. We like, surpassed our goals. Like, let's keep going, But I think that sometimes it's hard because I feel like there's so much noise, especially in social media, where you're like, okay, well, everyone has so much to say. What can I possibly add that hasn't been said already? And I think that's where
Yeah.
my struggle is like, well, I guess my story's a little bit different, but is it though? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, one thing that I heard that always, like, used to help me, and I thought this was really interesting, is, like, and I think it was from Gary Vee, but he's like, "You probably don't have anything new to say, but your voice is different, and the perspective that you have on that topic is different than anyone else's just by nature of you being, like, your own individual." And I always thought that was interesting to, like, let go of this idea that, like, you're gonna create something that no one else has created because the likelihood of that is, like, not really.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, Andrew's 40 now, and I'm 39, and
And 3/4.
shut up. And it's so funny because I think my whole life have had imposter syndrome, and, like, the older I get, the more I just realize that, like, everyone kind of doesn't know what they're doing, and they just, like, do it anyway, which I think is
Mhm.
so interesting that, like, I wonder if you just feel imposter syndrome for, like, your whole life, you
Uh,
know?
Huh?
Because like,
Yeah.
I mean, do you ever sometimes I feel like I'm still, like, this 18-year-old kid who, like, doesn't know
oh,
you know?
absolutely. Yeah.
And it's just funny, to think about that, like, even, folks, like, that are much older, like, likely still feel that
Yeah.
with what they're doing. I don't know.
I think so
Something
because I think everybody has that childhood trauma that they carry with them, and I feel like,
Mhm,
I was like so chubby when I was a kid, and I was bullied and stuff like that, and English was not my
Mm,
first language, and
mm,
so just remembering all of those things, but also I think that now as an adult, I realize that carrying all of that is just so heavy. It's just
mhm,
you don't need it and it doesn't serve you. It could be, I mean, it it helps you become who you are, but
mhm.
sometimes
mhm.
letting go of those traumas don't really serve you in the present day. So sometimes it is okay to let that go. I think it's hard because I feel like everybody is I don't know. I feel like maybe we feel that more and more because of social media, where everybody presents this like perfect life, and if you don't feel perfect, then it's hard to to feel good about yourself. And I feel like that's why I do the whole thing. I'm like such a good post and ghoster. Like I don't want to read the comments. I don't want to like follow up with what you have to say. I just post and I ghost because mentally that works out better for my mental health, because then I get into like this whole deep dive as to like, oh my God, you know, I am not married. I don't have kids. I'm in my mid 30s. Like, am I a failure? And then I look back and I'm just like, well, I don't think I would have done it differently though. So,
Yeah.
you know, is that really a failure? I don't know. Maybe to some people, yes, but I'm not really living for other people. I'm just kind of living
Mhm.
for myself. So, you know,
Yeah. Love that. Speaking of, I know we kind of talked about how the first 4 years were really like difficult. Can you look back and when you started in real estate or even now, what would be like one of the most important lessons that you learned from a failure or um anything that just sticks in your mind as something that like really transformed how you think about like your business?
yeah, so I think what I used to do was I would be so focused on the result. Like I need to get to that closing table. I gotta go do this because it's gonna help me with my numbers. And I just realized that that set me up for failure because I was so emotionally invested in it that when something didn't happen, it would devastate me. Now, what I do is like, I don't focus on the result, I focus on the process. So I've learned to fall in love with the process of like, okay, going under contract, negotiations. Okay, now we're back on the market. What do we do? And just like learning and falling in love with that process has made me feel like so now those like little blows doesn't really hurt as much because I'm like, okay, well, this is just this particular journey and I could separate myself from that versus before I was just like, again, I was like so married to the result. And I think when you do that, you set yourself up for failure. And I think that people do that with like dating and like even with working out. Like if you don't get abs within 3 weeks and you're like, oh my God, you know, this doesn't work. And it's like, no, it takes actually a few years and it's about the process. So it's a learning, it's about being consistent, it's learning, it's being able to adapt and evolve. And I think with COVID, that was like a test more than anything to see how
Mhm.
resilient you could possibly be. And you know, and I think that was like when I really was able to take time and reset a little bit.
I think that's a great point. You know, if you're listening to this, just really let that sink in. I think there's is it Atomic Habits?
Yeah.
James Clear.
Yeah.
And he in the marry the process, divorce the result, basically exactly what you just said. I think that's also a good antidote for people that get, maybe they have a big goal and then they hit that goal. And if you've ever had this happen where you hit that goal and then you're like, what now? I thought I would feel, fulfilled and excited after hitting this goal. Instead, I feel empty and I don't know what to do now. I think that's just what you just said. You're so focused on that result that you don't realize that the happiness that you get is by pursuing that result, and the work that you're putting in and the consistency is so good for your mental health, and it's so necessary in an industry like ours where there's not a ton of residual. It's more like every month we hit that reset button and we have to go again. But if we can stay consistent and not be married to that result, I feel like you can just be so much happier and more successful personally and professionally. I think that's a great point.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned before that, one of the things that you had wished that you knew before getting into the business was just the lifestyle. It was kind of a shock to you. Um, Tell us more about that.
I mean, like I've always had like a job, I had a boss, you know, I didn't realize like what a roller coaster it would have been. Cause I mean, now it's different. Like now I've definitely built consistency in my business, you know, but but when you first start, it's like you get these crazy great months and then it's dry for the next three. And so it's that I think that was the most difficult thing and just learning to balance, like learning to work on your business, but also consistently, work in your business and on your business. So I feel like that was very difficult to like balance that. And I think now I'm in a great place where I could delegate a lot of things that I'm not good at. And so I feel like that's why I'm able to be a lot more consistent with my work and just honestly just focus on what I'm good at versus trying to wear all these different hats, but you kind of have to as an entrepreneur. And I think that that's hard just because you don't have the money to delegate, even though you should, but you just don't have the funds to. And I think once you're able to, and then you care about it so much that it's like your baby, you don't want to
Mhm.
let it go because it's like, oh my God, can they take care of it as well as I can? I think that sometimes you just have to let it go and trust that sometimes you're not good at everything, and that's totally okay.
Mhm.
But that just allows you to have more time to focus on the things that you want to focus on, and I think that that's a good, I think that's a blessing.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And it is tough, especially when you first start out. Every lead that you get as an entrepreneur, as a sales professional, is just gold. Your reputation lies on it, your commission lies on it, and you want to do a great job. And it is hard to delegate that out. Was there a time in your business where you had hired the right teammate, or I guess like what shifted from you being comfortable with being able to delegate some of those tasks out?
So I mean, I had to hire a business coach, and I was like, "Hey, I don't know this business as well as you do. You've been in it for 20 years. I just started 4 years ago. Like, help me." So
Mhm.
I think that when he was able to like, "Hey, you have to like, if you could buy time, what would you do with that time?" And that was
Mm.
something I never thought about. I was like, well, you could have money, but if you don't have, but money can buy time, right? If you
Mhm.
have a lot of time and no money, there's really nothing, not much you can do, right? But it's like, but that's such a great problem to have is when you have money, but you don't have time because that money could buy time. So when I was able to figure that out, I was like, okay, that's cool. That's interesting. So I hired my TC, I hired a social media person, I hired like a CPA, so I don't have to handle any of my finances. I hired a trainer. Like I just hired out as much as I can. And then that just opened up so much more time for me to just focus on what I'm good at, first of all, but also be able to live life. Because for a moment, like especially in the first few years when you're working like crazy, you don't have a lot of time. And then you don't have time to like go out with your friends and stuff like that, and then slowly you start to build this resentment towards your own career. You're like, wow,
Mhm.
I did this is supposed to be my dream, but I'm so damn lonely and I'm so unhappy. How do I change this? And I think one of my biggest fears is to like live life and look back and be like, I actually really didn't live it. I just kind of worked. And that is the only
Mhm.
memories that I have. And I never want to look back and have that.
Mhm. I think it's really easy for people who are successful to get into that, like, where and especially, like, I would say with, an entrepreneur or sales where, like, there is no stop. Like, you just
Mhm.
keep going, and you
Yep.
could get more and more and more and more, and you have to really be honest with yourself about, like, where does this end? Or like, what am I comfortable giving up to get to the next level? Andrew just went to a conference last week, and we were talking about that this weekend, how, like you always give something up depending on like what you're doing. And so you have to really like evaluate, I think sometimes, do I actually want all of this? Because I'm going to have to give something up to have it. And so I think for you to, you know, be aware enough to say like, yes, I want to be successful. And I also want to like enjoy my life and feel like I've had one where I can do stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and I think some people just don't reflect on that. It's hard though, you know?
Well,
Well, you have
it's
yeah.
It's
Go
hard
ahead.
because it's called like it's what I call a success tax. So like in order
Yeah.
for you to be successful, you have to give up something, right? But is that something, like I think after COVID, you kind of had to learn how to reprioritize. Like, what are the things that are most important to me? And when everything is removed from your life, where you don't like, it doesn't matter if you had a nice car. It doesn't matter if you made 15
Nope.
million that year. It doesn't matter any of those things. It was what mattered the most was the relationships that you have with yourself, with the people around you, and in your community, right? And I think that
Mhm.
allowed me to reassess, like, oh my gosh, I've been neglecting all of these things for so long, and I didn't realize like how truly unhappy I was until that moment where I like could take a breath and was like, okay, I need to do a little bit better, because I don't ever want to look back in life and regret not spending time with people I care about, or just even spending time with my dog. Like, he's so amazing. And I think that during that process, it just made me realize that if everything is truly gone, what is the most valuable thing I own? And it's the relationships I have with people. Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, and again, that's great that you have that awareness to like acknowledge what you were feeling and then take a step back and actually do something about it, whether that's delegating or just figuring out a different plan. I think that's really cool that you did that. Um, Shifting a little bit, Jen mentioned I was at a sales conference this past week. I saw this really cool quote that said, "We do not rise to the level of our ideas, we rise to the level of our actions." And as a sales professional, I feel like that always hits home to me because, I'll have good ideas or I'll, study certain topics. But what it really comes down to when you want to get results is mostly taking action. So on your day to day, are there certain things that you do every day or every week, every month, that from like a prospecting perspective, like helps you, generate business and stay in front of your people? And if there are things, would love for you to share those with us.
Yeah, so I think one of my biggest things is just to just love on people. So I love surprising people with like little gifts and little notes and stuff like that, because I genuinely love my clients. And even and I think our closing dates are normally just so sad because we don't get to spend as much time together. So it's funny because it's like a happy day, but then it's also so sad because like it's not like and I always tell them, like, it's not, we're not breaking up. Like, I'm still part of this life. But it's just such a gift to have that type of relationship with your clients. And so I try to spend as much time with them, but I think it's harder and harder now that things are opening up again and we're like all busy. And so I think my thing is just sending them little notes to let them know that I'm thinking about them, and trying to pop by every now and then when I'm like in their area. So things like that. And I think that face to face interaction, and that it's and I think that they realize that's genuine, because it's not like I'm planning a list of like people to
Mm,
see. It's like really genuinely like, hey, I'm thinking of you. I just want to congratulate you on a huge milestone and things like that. I never ask for referrals, which is probably the worst thing ever. And I know that this is like horrible advice, but I really don't. And I just think that people, and I think it's just because the fact that I add so much value in so many other ways, that they're constantly thinking about me. And I never want to sound like super salesy, because that's not me, and that's not my brand, and that's not how I want to present myself.
Mhm.
I guess I work mostly like off of referrals. I don't like prospect
mhm,
as much anymore, but I think that I have such great, interesting, unique clients that like there's always a story. It's never like a one and done type of deal. There's always like a very in-depth story about like what the process was like, and I feel like that is what ends up selling, or maybe like capturing other clients. But I don't know, I
Mhm.
think it's just being myself, honestly. I don't
yeah.
know, it's not really
Well,
I wish
Well,
I had better
I
tactics. I really don't.
well, I think it's more and it's not a tactic, I think it's just who you are and what you do, but it's pouring into relationships,
Yeah.
and that's really I think that's like an underlying theme for a lot of real estate agents that we've talked to who are successful is like it's a focus on relationships and adding value, as much as you possibly can. And I think, like you said, you probably don't have to ask for referrals because your clients just know to refer you because they trust you and they know if they have a friend going through the process, how well you took care of them, that, they want them to have that same experience.
Okay, I have a totally unrelated question, but I
Okay.
was thinking
Shoot.
about this because I was reading your bio. So I know you like to work out and you do hit workouts. Do you have like I
Oh, those are
recently,
brutal.
yeah. So I got in, when was that? Like 6 months ago or something. We started going to a climber class, which is
I was like,
basically like torture on earth.
Yeah, it's a good
But
workout.
yeah, I'm just saying, do you have any that you like, any workouts that you really love?
I mean, I love weight training. I think that's probably like when I'm like, okay, so just so people know, I'm not drinking a White Claw, I'm drinking Celsius. This is
Liar.
It was
Just
a
kidding.
big step. I was like, I wonder if they think I'm drinking like at 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm not. I just would like to clarify, just in case. I love weight training. There's just something about it that makes me feel like stronger and more confident, especially
Mhm,
when you start to see the definition in your arms and your shoulders and your legs. And I just
mhm.
feel like so good about how I feel afterwards. Like I'm not a gym rat by any means. Like I'm like the girl that's in there for exactly 35 to 45 minutes. And then after that, I want to get the hell out. So I don't work out
Yeah.
with anybody because they're normally in there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I'm not that girl. Like I
Nope.
just, there's only so many stretches I can do to get to that point. So I like to just like, but I've been doing this app called the Sweat app.
Mhm.
There's different workout sessions or different programs there. So depending on my energy level, because before what I would do is like I would just keep pushing myself until I'm like so burnt out. And I just realized that my energy, especially now that I'm older, is not the same every day. There's some days
Mhm.
where I wake up and I'm just like, okay, let's go. And then there's certain days where I'm just like, hurting, my back hurts, like everything hurts, And
Yes, I know this.
yes, it's just I just am learning to have more empathy towards myself. I don't have that negative talk like, "Oh my god, you're so weak because you didn't do this today." It's like, "Hey, today's probably a Pilates day, and that's okay as long as we're moving our bodies and just being more empathetic and really going with that flow." I think
Yeah.
that's all that matters. I think that sometimes when people say things like, like, "Oh my god, you're crushing it, you're killing it, you're kicking ass." It's like, why are those such violent terms?
Yeah.
Can we get away from that?
Tone it down a little.
Let's tone it down, It's like not a Marvel movie. Like it's just, and I think that, like again, with starting with your self-talk, how am I feeling today? And what can I do to feel a little bit better if I'm not feeling great? What does my soul need? And
Mm.
like for example, yesterday I was like having a pretty rough day and I'm sitting here like so sad. And my friend's like, "Hey, did you check in with yourself today?" And I was like, "Actually, I haven't. That's a swell idea." So then I was like, "What do I need? What does my soul need at the moment?" And and it boiled down to a burger and some red wine, and
Love it.
that like changed the trajectory of my entire day.
I mean,
That's amazing.
burgers always change the trajectory of my day too, so I totally understand that. I think,
I love that.
and the reason well, I wanted to ask because I think that one of the things that we've both learned from just having, stressful jobs or, being successful is you have to like take care of yourself. Like you have to put like a huge emphasis on self-care, whether that's like eating a burger one day or like doing, workouts consistently. And I think that that's really where you're able to sustain kind of like those higher like stress levels. How has like some of those habits or like self-care impacted your business in a positive way?
Ooh, so many great ways. I mean, I think normally in the morning, that's my from 6 to 8, I never answer the phone. It's
Wow.
my hour to be by myself. I'm working out, I'm walking my dog. It's glam time. Like I need those hours to remind myself that I'm important, especially in a industry where you're catering to everyone else's emotions and their
Mhm.
journey, and you're not part you're just on you're and then whatever
Mhm.
they're going through, you're like that sponge, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes you
totally.
have to unload all of that, and so that's why it's so important for you to have that time to yourself, and I think that people think it's selfish, and I'm like, it's not selfish because you cannot be the best version of yourself if you're not for other people, if you're not showing up for yourself first, right? Wait,
Yes,
on the
yes,
plane,
yes.
they, like, tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you could do it for someone else, because you can't help and serve other people if you're not present and you're not there. And
Mhm.
I think that sometimes it's hard because, you're a mom, and I think that sometimes it's hard to I have friends that are like that too, where they feel there's, like, this sense of guilt, and I had that for a
Mhm.
long time where I'm like, "Oh my god, well, I'm spending too much time on myself." Then I feel guilty about it. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, at this point, there was I think there's a about like 2 or 3 months ago, I had a realization. I'm like, I'm gonna end up dying of a heart attack if I don't prioritize myself, because no one
Yeah.
else is gonna prioritize me but me. So this is my
Yes. Mhm.
responsibility. This is what I'm gonna be doing and I'm gonna commit to this process. When I am going to go to a spa day or get a massage, though that is my time to decompress, and everybody else will just have to wait until that's over, you know?
Mhm.
So
Well,
yeah.
like you said though, like it's benefiting everybody else by you having that piece, especially if you've got multiple sets of clients that you're working with, and every transaction is emotional. I don't care if it's the cleanest cut one that you'll have all year. There's still emotion. It's a very emotional process for buyers and sellers.
Mhm.
So I think that was interesting how you said that. Everyone's pouring their emotions on you. It's your job to be, you said sponge. I always say eye of the hurricane. Like there's so much going on with all these different,
Mhm.
emotions around you from all of these different people. And if you're not calm, if you run with every emotion, I mean, it's just gonna make things more stressful for everybody.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think it's just learning to detach yourself from it. Like, I've learned that especially during COVID, I know I keep bringing this up, back to COVID, but I've never really sat in stillness before. And I know that sounds
Oh.
really bizarre, but, like, have you ever like, when was the last time when you sat somewhere and just observed? No AirPods on, no music, nothing. You're not having a conversation, and you're just in the moment. And I haven't had that in a really long time, where I was literally sitting with a cup of coffee, and I'm like, "What the hell is that sound?" And it was birds chirping, and I haven't heard it in so long. And
That's
I'm just like,
amazing.
Oh,
I've
wow.
been in the city for so long, I don't even know what the birds sound like anymore, but I just haven't taken that moment to really observe and absorb all of that beauty around me, because it was always go, 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 go. Gotta call this person back, talk to this. And even if I wasn't talking to someone, I was thinking about it. And so I
Right.
felt like it was something that I needed to learn how to be in stillness and embrace
Mm,
it and be okay with it. That like
Mhm.
just because an email isn't coming through, that doesn't validate me. I'm gonna be okay. I'm just gonna enjoy this. I don't know
Mhm.
why my camera's a little blurry. Is it blurry over there?
let me
Oh,
see.
there it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that looks good.
so yeah, just things like that. Just being able to slow down. And again, I think learning to fall in love with the process of creating something allows you to do that because you're not in a rush to just get to the
Mm.
end result, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think sitting in stillness and finding peace like builds your character too. I think it's good for you, because when we're constantly just like, on our phones, which has everything that you could possibly imagine, just right there in our downtime, it takes us away from the present moment. And I think that, yeah, just your character is a lot stronger and can be built in a better way if you're used to, having a little bit of stillness.
You should go on one of those silent retreats. I've
Where
always
it's
wanted
like
to
3
try,
days. I
yeah.
know, I wanna try that too. That'd be a lot.
I don't know if I can. I'm such an extrovert that I feel like
Same.
I would just like I have I mean, the only thing I could actually do is I do solo trips, and that allows me to reset and think about like because I think with our industry, we're so used to catering to other people. Like we're people pleasers.
Sure.
And so that's why we're good at what we do. But sometimes it's hard to remember like certain things that you used to like that wasn't influenced by someone else. And it's
Mhm.
like such a weird thought, especially like the first day of the solo trip. You're like, wait a minute, what do I like to eat? Do I really
Yes.
like?
Totally.
Do I really
We went through that in COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, we totally went
That's
through
such a
that
good
during
point.
COVID. We
Yeah, it's like,
stayed
who am I? Yeah.
yeah,
Who am
we
I when I'm by myself is a
we,
completely different thing than who you are when you're around other people.
I
That's
was
a great
I was so
that's
high
funny.
risk during COVID that we stayed home until we got vaccinated,
yeah.
and so it was a straight year of us like, we really
Yeah.
didn't see
But it's
anybody.
exactly like what you just said, like,
Uh-huh.
who am I? What do I like to do?
Isn't that so like isn't that such a strange thought because you spend so much time with yourself more than anyone in the
Crazy.
world, but it's like that moment of silence where you're like, wait, who
Yes.
I want to
Yeah.
do. Like, do I genuinely
So weird.
want this activity? And it's like, no, I actually didn't. I just dated someone that I that did, and then I tacked on that hobby that I really don't like, you know. And I think
Yeah.
it's such a funny adult moment where you're like, I really, it's just learning to discover things about yourself and being
Mhm.
able to, again, detach from things that really has nothing to do with you and kind of rediscovering parts of you and that like I really think that goes into the relationships that you have with people, into work. It goes
Mhm.
into the relationships that you have with yourself. Like that's just so important to have. And I wish that people would teach you this like in the school because why did it take for
I
me to
know.
be in my 30s to like realize that I don't really like avocados, you know?
It's so true. You just don't learn you don't learn that you need to, like, focus on self-reflection or, like, self-awareness or any of those things, and then it's like, when you start doing it it's super cool, though, because I think once you start doing it, you learn to just constantly assess, like, how are you? What do you need
Mhm.
today? Or what like you were saying, and I think once you get in the habit of doing that, it's really nice because you can kinda, like, meet your needs, like, you figure out what you need and you feel this peace that you likely didn't feel in your 20s. At least I didn't,
Totally.
and so
Wow.
that's really cool once you learn how to do that.
Yeah, and what a simple process that is, right? Like, all you're
Totally.
asking is like, because you ask everyone else, "Hi, how are you? Are you having a good day?" When you like change that and then you ask yourself that, you're just like, this is so simple, but it's so important to do because you have to check in with yourself because you're going to be more honest with yourself than somebody else. Like I hate the question when people are like, "Hey, what's up?" Everyone always answers the same way. They always say
Yep.
nothing much, but then they go on a tangent anyway. And I'm like, well, why did you
Mhm.
say nothing much when there was a lot of stuff that was going on, right? But I just
Yep.
it's funny how like however you treat other people, and especially in a like however you treat other people is how you should treat yourself. And I think that
Mhm.
that's how you start to develop a more positive more like, I guess, like a higher self-worth and higher self-esteem
Mhm.
and stuff like that, because you could validate yourself. You don't need other people to validate you and to fulfill those needs anymore. Like you're good on your own, because you know who,
Totally.
yeah, and what you want.
Mhm.
Wow, that's a lot of good points. I think there's a ton to learn from this episode. So, Katrina, thank you so much for joining us. I think we should throw a surprise question. Maybe the
Yeah, what you
I
tell
got
me.
one. I got
Okay.
one. We've used this before. But if you were to write a book tomorrow,
Oh,
what would the book be about?
Ooh, that's a big question. Honestly, like I would love to write a book about the I mean, okay, I would love to write a book on my childhood traumas because there's so many.
Okay.
Like just growing up with a tiger mom and like a very traditional upbringing, and then just trying to navigate, because I was born in America, but my parents were Vietnamese, so like I learned everything, through their lens
mm,
first,
mhm.
and then just growing as an individual, and then trying to figure out like how do I combine two cultures without really sacrificing who I actually want to become. And so, and
Right.
then also just letting go of the generational traumas, because I felt like in my family, like it's very important for you to be married by a certain age, to have kids by a certain age. And so according to their world, I'm very much a failure because the fact that I did things on my own terms. But now that we've reached this point where everyone else is established and they look at me and they're like, damn it, we should have just done what you did. I was like, exactly.
You're like, "I told
Yeah,
you."
I mean, it wasn't like it was bad. I think it was just, I don't think that you should ever do anything on someone else's accord. Not that being married or having kids is a bad thing, but you should do it because you genuinely want to,
Totally.
not because someone's breathing down your neck and making you feel like if you don't do this, then
Mhm.
your value is nothing. And I want people to realize that you have so much value. You have so many gifts to give people, but the gift that you can give yourself is the permission to allow yourself to be you. And regardless if mom is disappointed or not, she'll get over it. Yeah, I guess that would be my book. Should I write it now? Because I feel like
I like it.
Yes,
Write it now.
I will read it. Do it.
That's awesome. Well, where can people find you?
well, I'm on Instagram. I don't know what my handle is. Do you know what my handle is? I have no
Hold, please.
Pull up the handle.
It's
I got it. I'm on it.
I do know you've got a great presence on Instagram because I see you on there all the time.
Oh, found it. Okay, Katrina.realtor. We, I mean, I'm also on Facebook. I'm trying to start a TikTok. I don't know how. So I'm
Coming
Oh.
soon.
yeah, coming soon. Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to do more videos in the future. So hopefully you guys will see more of me. Let's see what happens.
Right on. Well, check her out on Instagram, guys. And thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, review us. Have a great day.